Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the OSC online chat discussions. I'm really, really pleased to say that probably long overdue, in actual fact, we're delighted to have our former CEO and Central Coast Mariners legend, Shaun Mielekamp, with us this evening. Thanks very much for giving up your time tonight, Shaun. It's great to see you.
Right, thanks for having me on. It's nice to see some familiar faces.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I mean, I was surprised when I was doing a bit of research before tonight. It was almost 10 years that you were with the club, and so that's quite I can't believe that time went so quickly, because I seem to remember you arriving at the club, and we'd had been through several CEOs before that, and then you arrived on the scene, and we got to know you, and I can't believe it went so quickly, to be honest. It seems like almost a blink of the eye in some respects.
Well, one thing that did go quickly was my hair. I had a lot more when I started, sort of thing. So, yeah, it does. When you look back now, it does. Time does fly, and yeah, it was one heck of a journey. But looking back, it's. I remember when I took the role, I was thinking, I said to my wife, I said, if I last here more than a year, I'll be amazed, right? Like I'll be really, really happy, and it was a big step up for me at the time. So, and yeah, to have had a stint that went on for 9 years, and plenty of crazy times was really rewarding.
Yeah, I was saying it's. I think the hair comment you made earlier. I think if you look at most coaches, people involved in football, they all tend to either lose it or it goes very grey. I saw an interview with Monty only last week, and he's a lot greyer than when he started with us. That's for sure. So I guess it's just an occupational hazard. So just talking about your background, I mean, I think I would be right in saying that initially you came from a sort of sales background sort of perspective, Shaun. So you able to speak to us about how you became involved in sports management in general and then football specifically?
It's a really crazy story, right? So my background is in retail. I was working for Foot Locker. I'd worked there, from high school, and was there for sort of 12 years. And my last role was the national manager of Foot Locker in New Zealand. And I was over there with my wife Leslie, and she's a coastie, and she wanted to come home, and time to sort of grow up and start a family, sort of thing. So there was a bit of pressure to come back to Australia, and it all sort of happened in a blink of an eye, really. I came knowing that we wanted to come back to Australia. I came back to catch up with some friends and went to a rugby league game, and I'd noticed that there was an advert in the Big League magazine for a job at South Sydney Rabbitohs that didn't seem to sort of match what they were sort of asking, and where they were sort of advertising. And that was literally on the Friday that when I arrived, and there was a game that night, but I called them beforehand and sent in my resume, and I got a call straight back, and they said, "Oh, look, if you're serious, then come and see us." And I explained to them that I was only here for the weekend. So on the Saturday, I went over with probably a bit of a nasty hangover, as happens with when you go out with friends out in Penrith, and yeah, went to go and see him for the interview. Went really, really well, and then within hours, I was then in Shane Richardson's office, his home in Coogee, for a second interview, and then really quickly met Russell Crowe that weekend. And was offered the role within 48 hours, and changed my whole life, really. So I went back to New Zealand and told Leslie that I had a new job, and I was going to work for the Rabbitohs, and we're moving back to the coast, and that's how I got into sport. So I was there at the Rabbitohs for 2 seasons, and a bit under 2 years, and yeah, did some pretty crazy stuff with merchandise and licensing products, and that was a role that was there, and then Panthers found out I was a Penrith boy. So they asked me to go and head over to Penrith Panthers. I was there for 5 years, so that was a sort of rugby league background and grounding for me with all that, and forming the Pink Panthers was probably the key thing for me. But along that journey, I was really understanding and buying into community engagement and what it really meant for a sports club to engage with community. Something I was really passionate about, and then yeah, when the opportunity came with the Wanderers, I was actually Laurie McKenna that was actually the contact for me that got me in contact with Lyle Gorman. and there's another guy, Kyle Patterson, who was working for Football Australia at the time. They got me to meet Lyle, and then hearing what the vision was for Western Sydney Wanderers and that community engagement was something I really couldn't pass up. So that's how I ended up coming into football, and that's how it started.
A couple of questions off the back of that. How surreal was it meeting Rusty, first and foremost?
Yeah, it's still surreal. I still can't believe it. So it's and the stories that happened, and I'd be often called to his apartment in Woolloomooloo, and he had a real passion for merchandise. So we actually worked really closely together, and I think Richo was actually quite relieved because I didn't have to worry. He didn't have to worry about dealing with Russell and his crazy ideas with merchandise. But having that sort of direct relationship was something that we just can't believe is happening. But it's probably I've said it to Mike plenty of times. It probably gave me the skills that I needed when it came to dealing with Mike Charlesworth, because he's got just as many crazy ideas as well, right? So, yeah.
And so, were you surprised? I mean, obviously, then things. I think obviously it's the universe maybe speaking to you there, Shaun. You're back in the country for a weekend, and all that kind of happens in a bit of a whirlwind for you. So probably you're thinking that's the universe speaking to you, and maybe that's giving you the opportunity you're looking for. When the opportunity came up to go to the Wanderers, did you genuinely think that it would be as big as it became in the early years when it was first formed?
No, not at all. We knew something was there. There was definitely a lot of energy. I remember going out to the very first game out at Cook Park, and thinking, all right, well, I know I'd only just left Panthers, so it was really quite an eye opener for me, and was blessed with the "Who are you?" chant from the RBB when I went up to say hi to them, and try to form a rapport with those guys. But the way it captivated, in particular Parramatta, and what happened at Wonderland, which was a big project of mine to create that special space. We were going to Parramatta Reel's home ground and bringing not only a different brand but a different sport, to take it over, and that became really special, and something that there's plenty of Wanderers fans that I'm still good friends with. There was something really special that happened in those formative years. That so not in the wildest dreams, but definitely probably really, really proud of what has been established there, and also kind of expecting that club to reach its potential, which maybe our former coach Stage might get him there one day. I don't know. Yeah,
it's a bit. It's interesting to see how Alan will go there. I think he's obviously just fell slightly short last season. I don't think there's anybody that genuinely knows Alan that couldn't wish him all the best. He's a total gentleman and a very honest and genuine individual. So there'll be a lot of pressure on his shoulders, I imagine, given the expectations of a club of that nature. So it will be interesting to see how he deals with that in season 2. So hopefully he doesn't have too much good fortune at Central Coast Stadium, or sorry, Polytech Stadium, as I now need to refer to.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So how did your role at CCM come about, Shaun? I mean, obviously, given that you've made yourself obviously something of a reputation in the sporting space, first in league and then with the Wanderers, how did the opportunity at the Mariners present itself to you?
Oh, well, so by this time, I'd been on the coast for quite a number of years, and was playing soccer with Carry On, a local club, and all the friends and everyone around that I'd formed were all Mariners fans, right? So there was also quite a fair bit of banter, but it was pretty discerning, sort of what you're sort of hearing from the club at the time, and things were pretty shaky, and so I even had quite a few friends say, "No, mate, like you really should reach out to them and see if you can help out." I ended up getting in contact with Peter Story, who'd just been appointed, and just said, "Mate, look, I'm in the A-League. I'm probably one of the only people, sort of on the coast, really, closely connected with an A-League club at the moment. So here if you need, just, catch up for a coffee or whatever, and leave it at that. And then, Peter was still in England. I don't think he had got to Australia just yet, but as soon as he landed, he reached out and wanted to catch up, and we caught up at Terrigal, had a coffee, and pretty quickly he was pushing me pretty hard to come and join the Mariners. He needed somebody on the ground that could do a job for him. And look, I'll be honest, I was still unsure. I was in a really good position, doing some really good things at Wanderers, and great rapport with everybody there. And that was there was no need for me to leave. There was plenty still to be done, but I suppose curiosity, if anything, I flew myself to England. It was actually a pretty interesting little sort of sliding doors moment. I went to I booked my own flights. Thought if this is serious, I need to know a bit more about Mike and what he's like, and see if there's a connection there. So I booked my flights, and but I hadn't travelled for a while for it. So then, as I got to the airport, and I was literally I was going to be in the air longer than I was going to be in London. So I booked my return flight. I was only there for 2 nights, but as I got to the airport, it was 6 months until my passport was going to expire by 1 day. So they wouldn't let me on the plane because it was exactly 5 months and 30 days or whatever, and so I was 1 day short. And I said to him, "But I've got my return ticket. I'm here, like I'm literally in and out." And it was only because of whoever was looking after the airport at the time gave me the all clear. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got on the plane. And to be honest, if I didn't get on the plane, I wouldn't have taken the job, and probably would have stayed at the Wanderers if it wasn't for that moment. So I always look back at that with a bit of intrigue that it almost never happened because of 1 day. Yeah.
Interesting. So was it a difficult decision to leave Wanderers? Once you scoped out what the job would involve, and you'd met Mike, and you saw that there was an opportunity there, was it a difficult decision to leave Wanderers, given all of the momentum that was surrounding the club at that time?
Look, it was difficult. It was, I suppose, one of the main reasons I wanted to meet Mike is I really wanted to understand the role and the scope that it had. It wasn't initially positioned to me as a CEO's role, but it sort of had all those ingredients. When I met with Mike, I said, "Well, Mike, for me to do this right, I need to be the CEO, so I can really, really, lead." And he agreed to that. So there was just that part of a personal, journey to be able to become a CEO, which is very, very difficult. So that probably was the crucial part, to do that, because the smarter thing to have done was to have stayed at the Wanderers and continue to be with a successful club that was still traveling through Asia and doing a lot there. So, but no, I was. Left a lot of good friends behind, and they're at the Wanderers, and still really close with Scotty Hudson, who Scotty was working for me at Penrith Panthers, and it took me a while to get him over to the Wanderers. So it's really nice to sort of have seen someone you're really close with, step up and take the leadership of that club as well.
I guess just like all industries, Shaun, there's a network of people that and have worked with, and people, I'm sure, are always looking for good talent and good people, and that's why I think you've been successful in each of the roles that you've taken within the sporting arena. And we were very, very. I had heard, on a personal note, I had heard somebody at my own football club, I believe it was, or it might have been the OSC group, but it was someone that was associated with the Mariners in a fan capacity, I believe, actually said, when we had your one of your successors depart the club under something of a cloud, someone, I recall quite clearly someone saying, "Well, there's a guy that lives up in Carryong who's a coastie, and he's a really good guy, and he's at the Wanderers at the moment. I wonder if we'd be able to get him." So, there was a bit of, certainly a community sort of awareness of your presence on the coast, Shaun, and I think that was it was quite interesting to see that come to pass. Not long after, probably within 6 months of that conversation, that the next thing we know, you were appointed as the CEO at the Mariners.
Yeah, well, it wasn't Jake Banks, because he would have used some much more colourful language. So.
Well, I'm aware that we're not quite past the watershed yet. So, having been involved with both league and football, do you have a preference of which code you follow, or have a sort of leaning towards? I mean, obviously, codes like the NRL are obviously more, a much more stable position financially than football. But, do you feel there's, do you have a preference, or do you feel there's, opportunities rather than challenges in one space or the other?
Yeah, I mean the actual technical parts of the jobs are very very similar from an administrative perspective, but yeah, the industries I suppose are very very different. You there's nowhere to hide in football, and in particular in the A League. So, those who who can't cut it, we really get sort of shown up pretty quickly. Rugby league has definitely got a lot more resource and a lot broader scope, and a lot more media attention that's there. Do I prefer one or the other? I don't know. It's hard to say, really. It's like picking between two kids, in some aspects, So, but look, it's there's no doubt that the you know the round ball game is really really special on the pitch. That's there. It's there's something really magical about what can happen, and rugby league is far more combative and intense and brutal, right? So which has got its own prestige around the gladiatorial aspect of it. So, but ultimately, my real passion is for for the community engagement and the people in the grandstand, and I'm same with the Tigers now. There's so many similarities, so many really good people, so many people who have supported the club through some really really tough times, and they deserve a club that gives them some lifelong memories, and I really hope that that the West Tigers fans get to experience that. Very very similar, the early success for the club, and then a pretty big dry spell, in between. So it's not lost to me how similar the pattern might be.
Yeah, I think when that announcement was made that you were leaving to go to the Tigers, I did see a number of parallels there personally, and I spoke to you just before your departure, and I think, like you say, that you clearly have a real passion for the community and engagement with the community, and I think we've all genuinely appreciated that, not just from an OSC perspective, but also from a general fandom perspective. I know that you were very gracious with your time whenever you were able to, with all of the fan groups, and that they all continue to have massive respect for you as we do. And so that's a testament to your character as a person, Shaun, and your vision and your beliefs and all those underpinnings. But so what you mentioned earlier that Mike, like a little bit like Rusty, has a few out there ideas. Can I ask because I can remember having a conversation with you on the telephone when I was in New Zealand at the time, and you rang me to tell me that Mike had decided that he was going to approach Usuain Bolt to come and play for the club. So just looking back on that period, obviously it was a challenging time for the club. What was your real thought about that when Mike pitched it to you? Did you think it was never going to happen? Did you think it was something that maybe could, blow the lid off the market, or what was your perspective on it?
It's crazy, right? Like, I suppose if I wanted back to the first time I flew over to England to catch up with Mike and really sort of talk about what is this role, what are you looking for at the club, and how do I see this come together? There was a couple of really poignant things that stuck with me, one was that Mike had said that a really good CEO would never do the right thing by the owner, which fascinated me at the time, and I didn't understand it, and it was only as experience came in that I really got to understand that he understood that a CEO will put the club first, despite how much he would expect the CEO to put the ownership first, that's there. So it was always a constant conversation between Mike and myself, and governance, I suppose, so it sort of comes into how does an owner and a CEO really connect, and then that quickly rolled into what do you really want from the club, and Mike had said he wants everybody in the world to know who the Central Coast Mariners are, and at the time he thought, oh well, that's a that's kind of nice, but pretty crazy, sort of a thought. So hang on one sec for me. Oh, sorry, I thought I had a visitor, but that's all right. So it sort of flowed out that way that the idea of having the Central Coast Mariners known, right throughout the world was always something I was tasked with. And bizarrely enough, it was me who approached Mike and said, Mike, I think we might be able to have a shot at Usain Bolt, and he jumped at it, sort of thing. So, but yeah, it was actually. I think I'll always be credited and infamous at the same time for that little period in that little journey. But what came to be a task that was assigned to me, I said to Mike, well, everybody around the world now knows who the Central Coast Mariners are, and there's still, I don't think you can go anywhere around the world and say, oh, Central Coast Mariners, the club that we had Usain Bolt, right? So that's it does sort of stick.
Well, I suspect Harry Redknapp still thinks we're the South Coast Mariners, but anyway, that's another story.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah.
So during that 9 years you were at the club, obviously a number of things changed, and there were periods of success and periods of not so much success. How many coaches were there during your time at the club?
Okay, great question. I haven't actually counted them out. So started with Tony Walmsley. Hutch was sort of interim for like a month. Yeah, that was in there. So and then Paul Ocon, Wayne O'Sullivan, was there. So Mike Mulvey, Monty, Stadge, Jacko. I think that's it. I haven't missed any. Have I? God forgive me if I did.
I think you're right, because we were having a bit of a conversation offline about this in the week, and we went for a period of time there with Laurie as the only coach of the club, which was kind of a bit unusual even in those days for coaches. There's always been a coaching merry-go-round in the A League, as we know, but then we seemed to go through a period where it was a new coach every other year. MOSC, of course, was in amongst that as well, wasn't he? So there's all that kind of that doesn't help you necessarily build for the future. I mean, there's always been player turnover, and I guess that's another challenge for the club to manage on a year-to-year basis, as we've seen this last season. But how difficult? I mean, obviously some of those guys, they come in and they, you get to know them, you work alongside them, they're colleagues. They, in some cases, I'm sure, become friends as well. How difficult is it to see those guys then, or from your perspective, being instructed by the owner of the club that it's time to move them on and bring someone else in? I imagine that's quite a difficult task.
Yeah, the hardest part, and you have to remind yourself that that you are the CEO. You are there to put the club first, and if you can't hide, from that's a responsibility that can be really, really tough, and every one of them's got a particular story, and some of them are really quite deep and personal. But I'm really glad that I have kept communication or a relationship with all of them. There's definitely no, to my knowledge anyway, no real sort of bad blood. I think very, very highly of all those coaches. They all brought something to this club, and we wouldn't have achieved what we had achieved if it wasn't for every coach all the way through. They all played a part, and they all built on each other. None of their time was wasted at the club.
No, I agree. I think, and people sometimes lose sight of the fact that not only are we a player development club, but also a back office development club as well. So not just the coaches, but strength and conditioning and office staff, etc. So it is a place where people come to learn and then move on to the next step in their careers. As we've seen, we were having a conversation I think yesterday about the two former media managers who are now at FIFA. So it's across the board as far as the club's concerned, isn't it?
That's what's a real key part, really embracing that, really diving into that as an organisation. What happens on the pitch happens off the pitch. There are hard conversations. There's realities that come through, but along the journey, everybody grows, and everybody needs to leave the club in a better place than what they found it, and the club needs to help everybody be better when they leave than what they came.
Absolutely. As you say, it's a journey. And there's lots of moving parts to that journey, and you've obviously been a very major part of that. I would argue, from where I sit, as I say, the OSC has been in existence now for quite some years, as you're aware, and there have been times when it's been difficult to have conversations and communication with the club in the dark days. But ever since you arrived, we found that you were an enormous advocate for all of the fan groups, and were willing to engage with us on anything we asked you to, and to give it your best energies. So I think that speaks to your speak volumes to your character, and your way of doing things, so to speak. So just to get back, reflecting on something more positive. Can you speak to do you have a particular favourite moment at CCM that you can share with us?
I definitely don't have a particular one. Yeah, it's the relationships, right? I think is the best part of it, rather than a moment for me to call out. The friendships, the people that come to the club, coaches, players, and staff in particular. I spent all day with Dan, and we reminisced and had a good time, and those real special moments, because of the relationships that are there. So definitely being there at Combank Stadium, and that amazing grand final, and all the 1,000 little stories that echo off it. Dan throwing beers onto Monty whilst the game was still going on, and all those little bits conjure up a billion different memories, and traveling through to Asia for the AFC Cup was really, really special, because that was a goal that I had when coming to the club. Having done it at the Wanderers, I was really ambitious that I didn't want to have this club not experience that again. So, but yeah, wow, I don't know. There's so many little moments that are out there, and they're all very, very treasured. So, I don't know. I can't really just sort of grab one to call it out, Yeah. So
perhaps we'll change the question up a little bit. Do you have a favourite moment at the stadium?
Favorite moment at the stadium? It's hard. It's hard not to have this bizarre, bizarre love for the really, really crazy moments. So, so it's, because you just can't believe that New Year's Eve game. I can't believe it, right? I just can't believe it. I can't believe what Danny McBreen said, but we've been such good mates ever since, right?
Yeah.
I can't believe from all those crazy moments just added to what is just such a special patch of grass, and my favourite moments were always post game. Just being able to have hundreds of times that I was able to walk out into the pitch after a game and soak it in, whether it was win, lose or draw. Just knowing that's an opportunity that I won't have one day, and today I don't. I can't just walk out there anymore. So I really did treasure some of those more quiet times. That's just when everyone had just about gone home, and just walk out and just enjoy the palm trees and the grass and the moment that we had. Yeah,
it is a very special location, Shaun, and we're very, very blessed to have it as our home ground. Were you surprised that the APL allowed us to have the grand final there last season, or season 4 last? Sorry.
I was overjoyed. Not surprised, because it was so friggin' obvious. And again, I think this was starting to become a real testament of, what was becoming a pretty powerful machine in Central Coast Mariners in what we needed to achieve. Absolute credit to Alisar and Nadine and Chris and the crew that was on the time that brought that together. And it's real credit to everybody that made that happen. And And yeah, that pitch invasion was fantastic. And I was just spewing that I'd injured myself at soccer the day before, so I couldn't run out there myself. So I had to stand in the grandstand and watch it. But those who saw me limping around. But yeah, again, when you think back of the journey that we've had and how much that our club had been disrespected a lot of the time and treated like we didn't deserve to be in the league, and that we weren't good enough, and that our venue wasn't good enough, and to have that moment to really showcase to everybody in the world, what this club really means was unbelievable, and such a huge moment.
I think it's a moment that will live in every Mariners fan's memory for forevermore. It's the sheer unbridled joy of it, and I still chuckle when I hear it described as the politest pitch invasion in history. So it speaks volumes to the character of our region and our fans. So yeah, it was quite a special occasion. As much as the Combank final the year before was an incredible experience, and I think probably, and in truth, probably a better story for Australian football, because had Melbourne City won that grand final, as was expected by many pundits, the story would have been largely forgotten 2 weeks after it happened. So the fact that the largest, or let's say the most affluent potentially club in the country, got absolutely taken to the cleaners by the smallest club in the country running on the smell of an oily rag, was a far bigger, impactful story for football in Australia than the reverse would have ever been.
Yeah, absolutely, and So to knock off Melbourne City and then Melbourne Victory, just pure amazement and absolute credit to those players who did it, and the coaching staff that supported it all the way through. That's where the real magic really does happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The characters that are involved with the club have generally been able to to pull up stumps and to produce things that they probably had little or no right to do so, but not without a lot of hard work in the background on a lot of people's parts, back office staff, included. So I think we should never take those moments for granted. And I know that personally, my memories of the grand finals have always been, ones that I'll treasure forever, especially the ones we won. Obviously, are more pleasant to go through. But yeah, it's an amazing story, the Central Coast Mariners, and we've got a couple of videos or a couple of documentary series to reflect back on those moments as well. So yeah, it's permanently etched in football history. Who would you say has been the biggest character that you've worked with in football, player, supporter, or sponsor? Is there someone? So I mean, you mentioned Dan earlier. I imagine he's fairly high on the list, but it's a bit like being asked to choose your top 10 best ever songs, I guess. But is there people that have really left an indelible mark on you?
Yes, absolutely, and I just rattle through a few. Like when you ask the flat question, who's the biggest character? Jason Cummings, without any shadow of a doubt. For me, he's just an enigma. I've still kept in contact with the Cum Dog, and me and him had a really close particular relationship through all the craziness that was him. But probably more about who's had a real impact. That's there, Monty, great mate, and we went through all of it together, and from the moment I started, and and he was captain, and we had to talk about the situation of where the team and the club was at, right from the outset, all the way through to have stood side by side, with Monty, and seen him get through and seen him evolve, seen him change from a player, to a coach, and him and his family and all that. There's such a big impact. I have no doubt that Monty will be a life member of the club. And when the time's there, Simo's the same. I remember talking to Simo about coming back, because when I'd started, Simo just left. Sort of thing. So we didn't have that sort of instant sort of relationship. And I think if anything, over time, while Simo was at Sydney FC, there was for him and Wilco. I never worked directly with Wilco, but got on really well with those guys, and there was just that shared love for the club. And then as Simo came, I remember catching up with him at Avoca and talking about the journey that was coming ahead. And then he was all good. He was like, yeah, cool, no worries, I'm keen to come back. And then within a couple of weeks, I'm talking to him about Usain Bolt, and the look that he was giving me, like, what the F have you done, Shaun? And I'm just begging him that I needed his leadership, to get us through, what was going to be something pretty crazy. And Simo is a life member, and that number 19 jersey being retired forever, I think is a really big part of the club and the club's history. They're ones that really sort of stand out, but you can't stop. Gobi, Laurie, all the coaches, that's there. Dan and Tyson. There's way too many. For me not to apologise for not naming every one of them, and it's and I just think of the ones who've been there for a really long time, gone through really big journeys. Unsung hero in Dobbo. Everybody sort of, everybody's been around the club knows Dobbo, and it's those personalities that make this club so special.
Well, there's no doubt the club has been blessed with a number of those people with those qualities. I was at Plume on Saturday and bumped into Pat Tatum. And bless his cotton socks, he was up there to watch Mickey Neal, one of our former alumni, play. On the Saturday afternoon game. And so the people like that around the club, you've got so many names, as you say, you could mention. I feel privileged just as a fan to have known some of those people reasonably well, and to call a number of them friends. And I think that is a true testament to what this club is genuinely about at its core, is that bond between the community and the club. And we hope that we're not going to be heading into another period of difficult years, but the football landscape in Australia is still obviously a very challenging one, particularly in recent years with what's gone on at the APL. And there's obviously a cloud over the club at the moment with regard to investment and ownership. And having been there, I think I'm right in saying yourself, can you maybe talk to us a little bit about what due diligence entails for a club when someone's maybe looking to come and buy or invest?
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose there's a fair bit that does go through a process, and because even when Richard came, Richard had to go through the due diligence process that took a really long time, to be fair, and ultimately the Football Australia will make up the rules as they go, and I'm sure that Heather Garriock is a good friend. If she hears that, she will probably laugh and chuckle and appreciate that as well. That those goalposts will continue to move, and I think that they need to, because every candidate, every person coming into the sport will have different parts, and there is a level of governance that needs to happen to protect football and the game in the country, and to protect the clubs ultimately. So for me, sometimes long processes they get the better outcome as well, right? So I know that everybody will be wanting things to be rushed, wanting things to happen now, to come through. But I can just implore everyone to be really, really patient, and take a breath, for it. So and trust that this great club is just going through a cycle.
Yeah, I think we having met your successor and got to know him a little bit over the last 6 months or so, we understand that he's in a very difficult position at the moment, like you have been in yourself many times. And there's things he just can't say and impart to fans for fear of breaking non-disclosure agreements or potentially jeopardising any discussions that might not be going on. So it's you would have walked that journey personally, Shaun. So I'm sure you have a lot of sympathy for his situation at this moment in time.
Greg's Greg and I have been really close, and it's when you really look at what is in the fabric and the DNA of the club, The academy becomes a huge part. Characters, you mentioned characters before, but Ken Chambry definitely becomes a really important character. When the club had to transition and pick up the academy from Central Coast Football. This was vital because at the time, the club didn't have to, and this was a high risk of being a cost and could have very easily gone down the path of where you see some other A-League clubs that don't structure an academy. And I do believe that if it didn't happen, the club wouldn't have existed. So a lot of that legacy, is still in around. Cameron Stone, has got all that knowledge. He's been at the club for a very, very long time, and I think that that's really important. His role that's there, and then that connection with the academy and Central Coast Sports College was something that I spoke to Mike about in London during the interview, and quickly met with Paul Chapman and that sort of vision, and maybe took us a while as a club to really understand that the potential of the school and that connection, and Greg having his background in there, really can play a really crucial part in what the future of this all looks like. And I reach out to Greg all the time, really to have his back whenever he needs for the journey ahead, knowing that this is not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say, that speaks to your passion for the club, I think. And I always remember one of the things that sticks in my memory, Shaun, was how hard you worked on re-establishing a relationship with Central Coast Football that was, somewhat damaged by, previous incumbents or previous circumstances. So, there's a lot of moving parts, not just the running of the club day to day and the football roster and the football coaching staff. There's all of that, background noise to deal with as well.
I'm sure Darren Sprott is still wondering why I, praised him so many times. It's important, right? And what we created in the football ecosystem up here, I still talk about at length in my current role. I'm still very passionate that there's nowhere in Australia that has got the opportunity to have an ecosystem like what happens on the Central Coast, and that includes Central Coast United and includes Matty Crowell and all the local clubs and how that really comes together. That is at the heart and soul of what it takes to grow a sport. And I look at it with great pride when I see the huge numbers of participants that Central Coast Football has got. Not that we did it in any aspect, but we at least played our part to give everyone pride in a sport that was theirs in the region, and then when it all starts to connect, that's really that's really the magic that gets you to a point that you've got a sold out grand final, and the Plotters pitch invasion. Most of them would play soccer. So
yeah, I still wrinkle my nose a little bit when I hear the hackneyed phrase that, oh, the Central Coast is a rugby league heartland. It isn't. I mean, some people may like to spout that, that illusion, but the reality is that there are 15,000 registered players on the coast, and that's more than AFL and NRL put together. Now, not that you should be comparing sizes of appendages, but the reality is that football is, Central Coast is a football region, and I think the region genuinely feels good about itself when the Mariners are doing well.
Yeah, no doubt at all. Yep. That's and that's the pressure that's going to happen for Greg and his team and the Mariners is to keep that, right. Is to really, they will have far more pressure to perform and be a great club. I think there was plenty of years where, there was just hey, thank God we're just alive, sort of thing, and just happy to, I remember that year we came eighth. I think it was with Paolo as coach, and it was almost like that was just a sense of relief. Whereas, I don't think that will be acceptable, for the club anymore. It's finals and higher every season, because we know we can do it, even if it's with the youngest of kids, with the smallest of budgets.
Yeah, as disappointing as last season was, obviously after the highs of the preceding 3 or 4 years. We weren't that far away as a club from maybe making the top 6. I mean, it's I've spoken to Jacko. I mean, Jacko is, I've got to say, as much as I've enjoyed speaking to a number of our coaches, obviously Monty and Stadge have become friends as well. And I have huge respect for all of them. But Jacko has had to turn that winning trick one time too many perhaps, and then the injuries on top have crawled that season. So it feels like we fell an awful long way, but the reality is we weren't that far away. 11 draws in a season really does crawl your chances of doing anything more meaningful. But hopefully the situation becomes a bit clearer in terms of ownership in the not too distant future. I mean, speaking to that issue, Shaun, what do you feel are the major impediments? Beside financial loss. I mean, obviously, football in Australia, you hear this mantra that nobody makes any money in football in Australia, and it's probably a truth. What do you think are the biggest impediments to finding buyers or investors for the Mariners to make them more competitive or more sustainable? I'm not going to say competitive is the wrong word, but more sustainable.
Yep. Look, I think it's the league. I think it's the league is the biggest challenge. Richard Peel was the 11th potential buyer that I had. That's there, and there's been quite a number come through since. That was there. So yeah, the lack of confidence on the broadcast deal, the lack of confidence on the distribution to come through is really big challenges. There are overseas clubs that also can see the model, they like it, everything's all great, but they also go, well, Melbourne City's kind of, A-League. I think when you look at a global model, that sort of structure around having a big overseas club own an A-League club, and have that sort of pipeline. I don't know if that's really helping us, because if there's a great young kid in Australia, like the real big, next thing coming through, they're going to come on Melbourne City's radar pretty quick, and I do think that some overseas clubs may see that as a bit of a hindrance. Outside of that, it's just size or scale if they're after big commercial revenues. So if there's that more of a appetite from a buyer to have big commercial dollars to sustain the club, then there's no doubt that Central Coast Mariners is a smaller market to draw from. So but the key is getting him to fall in love with the club. That's why it takes time. They have to come and see it. That's why it did work for Richard, because he did get to spend time with the club before anyone had spoken to him about taking over for a while. So that's the real key part, and that's hard for somebody outside of the coast to find. It's at the moment they will look at it and go, well, that's a football club, and those people love it, but and until we have a billionaire who's a Central Coastie that really, really loves football, and I'm sure that some of our generation at some stage will be the future owners. It is a challenging scenario, and look, we are very fortunate that Mike Charlesworth does love the club and love leaving a legacy that's there, and and he's he does have so many critics, but he knows what that's all about. He doesn't shirk from all that, and there's no one can ever deny the fact that this club doesn't exist without him, and even to this day he's still doing the right thing by making sure that there's a transition to another ownership.
Yeah, I think you've only got to look as far as Western United at the moment to see what the alternative scenario could very frighteningly look like. And I do genuinely feel for Mike. I think, sometimes he can be his own worst enemy with some of the things he says and does, but, he has genuinely backed the club in, at great cost to himself. There's, I don't have a lot of truck for critics of Mike. Yes, would we like to be better funded? Of course we would. But you have to live within your means, and you have to be realistic about that. And it is, as you rightly touched on earlier, Shaun, the Central Coast market, there might be 350,000 people living on the coast, but it's difficult enough to get 12,000 people to a home game, and that's always going to be a challenge for the club. I mean, until such time as you can virtually sell the stadium out week after week, the operating metrics, as from long personal experience, are challenging economically.
Yeah, it's a tough gig. If it wasn't tough, I'd still have plenty of hair. And that's but real credit to to Simo. I said when I left that the club will always be fine if Simo's around. He's got the heart and soul. 100% correct around Jacko. Can't give him any more credit and Plaundit. He's a good friend, a good mate. And what he's been able to do is seriously unbelievable. And also, sorry, a big character I've got to call out is Emily Husband. So she was magic for our club, and we'll put a lot of pressure on every coach that ever coaches our women's team, because it'll be compared to Emily. Right? She was something amazing, and I've no doubt that she's got even more in her coaching career that is yet to unfold, and she'll always look back at a time with us. And geez, there's some great names, isn't there? Really when you look back, and
yeah, we have been very fortunate as part of that journey, Shaun, and as you touched upon, Emily's departure was very hard to take. We obviously will wish her the very best and the next step of her career, and it will be great to see what she goes on and does in the game. But it always feels a little bit like a case of why can't we have nice things for very long? Seems to be the Mariners' lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and look, but I credit to all the fans and supporters that they do buy into that. I see it when I'm out at Plume Park, and I'm cheering on this NBL team like I've never cheered on an NPL team before, right? They've got 2 rounds to go. They're so close, and if they don't get relegated, because they haven't had what a lot of the other NPL teams have had, they haven't had the luxury of a swarm of A-League players coming back at the back end of the season. It's been the opposite. It's been our under-20s that have come up through, and you watch those games and you just go, oh, he's going to make it. He's the next A-League superstar. Oh, I don't know if he can. But we buy into that, and we want them to go and and go and do what Kai Rolls has done, and go and do what all of them done, and go and do what Vuka did. Come back. We want them all to come back and finish with us as well. I think that's and I think they all want to as well. So that's it's so special, and so whilst it is temporary, but in other aspects it also stays for life.
Absolutely, yeah. Just speaking to the general football landscape a little bit, Shaun, do you have a personal opinion on whether the formation of the APL or establishment of the APL was what clubs thought it would be, or did it turn out to be something very different? I know Mike was very vocal about the clubs running their own league for a number of years, even before it happened. So do you feel that the APL was the right move in hindsight, or do you feel that we maybe would have been better off as a league, maybe going under a half and half model with the Football Australia, or not?
Look, that's a debate that'll rage on for forever. I think, this will definitely be one of those moments that everyone looks back in history, and it still hasn't run its course either way. I was right in the thick of it at the time. There was no doubt that I had relationships on both sides through this, and there was times in sort of some of those negotiations that that was called on to as things sort of passed through. And look, it's I think it's not what everybody wanted. I don't think anybody's expecting that this is what anybody wanted. I understand why it sort of played out the way that it did. The hard part for this was really the broadcast deal. It didn't deliver the way it needed to. The keep up didn't deliver the way it needed to. And when you peel that back as to why did those pieces of the puzzle not deliver, there was a key part of the missing ingredient, which was the governance for me, and the independent chair. The independent chair was meant to have come in. I think everybody thought that they were doing the right thing, and what was being built did make sense, and if keep up didn't happen, we might not have got the Silver Lake investment, and it might not have worked anyway. I don't think anyone can call this by any means a good outcome, but I understand that's it is what it is. But yeah, for me, the independent nature of the league needed to happen quicker. That happened because there was just too much influence by particular directions.
I can vividly recall. I mean, I share that sentiment 100%, and I can vividly recall you were very gracious in offering the OSC the opportunity to go and represent the club at the FIFA Working Congress, as you might recall. And we went there with I thought, very well, laid out sort of viewpoint for that took the whole of football kind of philosophy rather than just the specifics, self-interest kind of approach. And it was very, very well received by the FIFA delegation, I felt, and they in fact reached out to us after the meeting and asked for a copy of our presentation so that they could take that away and study it, and ask for further feedback. But one of the things that really struck me from that meeting, and this was a period of time, if we look back, when the A-League had been on something of a rise. I mean, it's always been a little bit of a rocky, sort of path, but the game was starting to gain more interest. It was gaining more viewership. It was, there were more fans turning up to games. We had the Alessandro Del Piero effect and things like that were going on. But the FFA seemed at that time to be very, very focused on just the financial side, not the holistic growing of the game and what's right. Where's the vision? Where's the drive? Where's the ambition? It was more a case of we've got to tick boxes financially, etc., etc. And I felt that was always holding the game back at that time. And obviously, what happened then was the game stagnated for the reasons of, I guess, lack of a vision or an awareness or an ambition. And then, of course, the league went into a new broadcast deal off the back of no expansion coming down the pipe, no excitement around the game. The Wanderers, just burst onto the scene, and then that had been allowed to just plateau as well. And I think, that there's a litany of missed opportunities for the game that it could have been a long way ahead of where it is now, in my personal opinion. I believe the league should be at 14, 16 or even 18 teams now at this stage in 20 years of playing the professional league existence, and here we are still with an odd number of teams, not really sure about anyone else coming in, and then possibly a team even folding. So it's just been, I think, for me, I'm a passionate, as you know, Shaun, I'm a passionate advocate for the game. I want to see the game find its own space in the Australian sporting landscape, and the seemingly not parochial interest, but the diverse interests seem to always hamstring that to a degree. Would you agree?
Think I always preached, the ecosystem that Central Coast had in the whole of game, really, really passionately, because I really wanted that to be an example across the whole country about how it could actually happen. It actually can happen that associations, NPL clubs, governing bodies, national teams, state teams, A-League clubs, championship clubs now, we can all coexist. We can all actually, filter, through together. But it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard when you see, you get under the hood of these things, and so some of the passionate blinkers that come through, the difficulty for governing bodies to connect properly and see through this. They get beaten up a lot. They push back a lot. It becomes really, really hard for that whole cohesion to come together. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I really just hope that the APL. I saw an article the other day that maybe they might have made a profit, and they probably have taken a leaf out of our book. We were the ones who sculled back and carved this club back to next to nothing for financial stability and viability, and that's what we had to do. So in some aspects, maybe the APL's hopefully following a similar trajectory, and these dark times for them are going to come out, in the long term. But it's going to take some real strong leadership.
Yeah, certainly the path. As you mentioned, I saw that same article, Shaun. It wasn't so much the amount of profit, because it was relatively modest, but it was the financial turnaround, that was the biggest story there, underlying that. And so you would hope that maybe the APL has turned a corner, and we can all hope that that's the case, because obviously, it's currently running on fumes to a degree. I mean, the cut in the as much as the cut in the club grants would have been painful for all of the clubs, it would have been even more so for ourselves, given that some of those bigger clubs like the City Football Group would have perhaps the ability to absorb that much more readily than we would.
Yeah. So, but I can only sit back and watch now, and sit in the stands and cheer on everybody, and hope that it comes to fruition the way it needs to.
Yeah, we remain optimistic, cautiously optimistic that that things will sort themselves out, and hopefully the game will be stronger for this period that it's had to go through and the learnings it's had to go through. And as you touched upon earlier, I think the key learning I think the APL needs to take out of this whole episode is governance. Is good governance. It seems that there was a lack of that, and certainly a lack of accountability with some of the spending, and I don't know that that's ever will be investigated, or whether will be analysed and lessons learned from it, but we can only hope. Well, that's all the questions I had for you, Shaun. I think there's been a few come up in the chat while we've been speaking, so I might just flick over to Colin to ask if there's anything on the chat that we'd like to ask Shaun before we let him go for the rest of the evening.
There's only one question in the chat, and that is, were you involved with the Luis Garcia transfer?
Lewis, not Louise.
Yeah. Well, actually, I might just. It's really interesting that you bring that one up, because I'm just scrolling through my phone because I got a message the other day from. I'll see if I can show this on screen. See if I've got it. I got a photo the other day from Tyson Scott over in FIFA, and he actually we signed the contract at 2 a.m. in the morning. As it happened, we had a very, very late night to get that through. I can't find the photo now, but he had the photo, and he shared it with me. We took a photo of. We couldn't believe it at the time that we just signed the contract with Luis Garcia. It came through. It was pretty special, and it was kind of an interesting one with Luis, because we're talking about the media strategy and around this, and knowing that it was going to get quite heavily criticised, we kind of wanted to actually sort of bizarrely downplay this. If we smashed it out really big right at the start, it would have blown up. So we announced it at half time whilst we're playing Adelaide, down in an away game, and it just sort of springed up and caught everybody off guard for that reason, to just buy some time till we can then get everybody to really get behind it. And those airport scenes were special. They were amazing. Plenty of you guys were there, and I remember Dan being down there, and like a kid in a candy factory. Dan was that was there. It was. But again, Luis, he brought something else to the club as well, right? Like, that was there. He, still will forever be the last club that he played for. But again, just a level of professionalism and a real scholar of the game. And it's amazing to think, that Luis Garcia is a Central Coast Mariners still. Yeah.
I've got a cheeky addendum question. Do you still keep in touch with Usuain?
No, I don't. I suppose I haven't. I've really wanted to publicly come out and smash him, because some of his comments past playing was just ridiculous. I had the really hard conversation. It was at Tommy's Cafe with Usuain, and had to let him know that we weren't going to meet his expectations. And the look of shock on his face, and probably disbelief. Like, he was like, I could tell he was looking at me going like, "Who are you? Who are you, mate?" Like, and like, I got on well with Usuain, but he wasn't a team guy, right? He wanted everything to be about him, and yeah.
Came from an individual sport, Shaun, so I guess there's no real surprises in that regard. Team sport does teach you. I say this to any kid that will listen, is team sport teaches you so much more than how to play a particular game. It teaches you collective responsibility. It teaches you to lose and win with humility, and all those kind of really important life lessons. And I guess from where he came from, he was the biggest thing since sliced bread. And I guess it served its purpose. I guess I still chuckle when I see the picture of him and Izzy coming on as subs at Campbelltown Stadium, and about 3 foot height differential between the two guys. But we all forever know who was the true footballer out of those two.
The irony of it all, the reason he came to us when I first spoke to him, the reason he came to us is because he wanted to be treated like a footballer. He genuinely wanted to be treated like a footballer. He didn't want, and then once we'd sort of gone through that, that's what I spoke to him about, was like, mate, if you want to be treated like a footballer, we're going to treat you like a footballer, right? And there was a structure to keep him at the club, and if he genuinely wanted to be a footballer, then yeah, he could have been, but he didn't genuinely want to be a footballer when it came to it. He wanted to be he wanted to be the face and everything being around him. So now who knows? Who knows what might have happened if we chose a different path through all that? And Mike and I will debate that for ever long into the night. So yeah.
And I can only imagine that the reverse was true when Luis Garcia arrived at the club. I mean, he's a consummate professional from all accounts, and would have brought, I imagine, a lot to the team off the field as well.
Yeah, he did. But we also learned a lot about marquee players, the impact they can have on clubs. Bringing in big names, and Ross McCormack, came in, and right through the summers, Ross McCormack who passed Usuain the ball out there at Campbelltown Stadium, now my home ground, right? So I stand there pinching myself that I'm still at that venue where where there's been some pretty crazy goals for us, and that was one of them. So, but I think for my learning was what that really looks like for a whole club. You can pretend that the big name, the marquee player, is not going to affect things. It's going to be business as usual. They'll just be another player and all that. No, it does. It is distracting. It does shift things, and the noise, the emotions, all that. The pressure it puts on the coaching staff, through all that. Does have an impact. So we learned, and Lewis was the one who helped us, sort of learn a bit about that as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's certainly been an interesting journey, Shaun, and you may, I'll say, I look forward to reading your memoir when you get time to sit down and write that, because there'll be lots of interesting stuff in there. I'm sure that we could all have a bit of a reflection over, and perhaps a chuckle or a tear in our eye. But I think there was another question came up in the chat. Colin, sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think I saw that one, Colin, from good friend Gibbo. Hello, mate. It's good to see you, Gibbo. Mate, I've got no idea, mate. So last I heard, I thought you were putting in your resume, Gibbo. But it's no. I can only sit back and cheer on, and be assured that that when the time's right, they'll announce the right thing there at in the women's team.
Well, I don't think I'm breaking any confidences by saying that Stephen told me when we heard about your shock departure that he was going to put his hat in the ring for CEO, but I don't know whether he ever got to the interview stage.
Yeah, no, I don't know if he did, but I'm sure he'd still. He'd love to be the women's coach. He'd love to be the CEO. There's one special thing is that us Mariners supporters, we're friends for life, aren't we? Yeah,
100%. All right. Well, look, I think we've taken up enough of Shaun's valuable evening time. We should let him go back to his family, and I can't believe it's taken us this long to have you on for a chat, Shaun. So it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you, as it always is. We wish you all the very best in your new career, or the next step in your career with the Tigers. And as I say, we know you'll pull up stumps there and do a great job. But we miss you, and we hope maybe to see you back in Mariners colours at some point in the future. Never say never.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, and still part of the family. Kids are in the academy. I'm still around, so bump into plenty out of Plume Park, and I think everyone knows at the club that I'm never too far away, and I look forward to the season kicking off very shortly.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Shaun. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Shaun.
All right, I'll leave you to it then.
Thanks so much, Shaun. That was brilliant.
All right, no dramas, guys. Like I said, look forward to catching up. Leave it to it.
I think we need to go on one of your beer tours. I need to organise that.
Yeah. We should do one of those. Yeah, for sure. Might when the draw comes out, maybe I'll have a look at a good beer tour up to Newcastle back or something like that. So, yeah. Cool. All right, guys, I'm gonna leave it to it. Cheers.
Thanks, Sean. Take care.
Cheers. See you. Bye.